This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. After returning home from a business trip, I overheard my 4-year-old daughter tell my wife, "Mommy, I like Tony Daddy better than the other daddy. Can I go to the amusement park with him next time?" Through the crack in the door, I saw my wife, who had been extremely cold towards me, gently patting our daughter on the nose and smiling as she said, "Of course you can. He is your real dad. And Tony is my wife's white moonlight, her first love." The results of the paternity test came back. I smoked several cigarettes, unable to muster the courage to look at the results. It wasn't until my secretary, Jack, knocked on the door and frowned at the heavy smoke in the office that I realized I had been out of control today. "President Rocky, we've secured the project with Julie Group." He handed me a thick stack of documents. I snapped out of my daze. "Just put it there. I'll sign it later." Jack nodded and left. I wiped my face and gently opened the paternity test report. The results showed that my beloved daughter Alice, whom I had cherished for 4 years, was indeed not my biological child. The dust had settled. I felt a strange calmness instead of the anticipated turmoil and sadness. Reflecting on it, there had been signs all along. A few years ago, my wife Haley, who had always been cold towards me, suddenly made a rare candlelit dinner. We drank aged red wine, and in a moment of passion, I forgot to use protection. But Haley, who had always disliked unprotected sex, didn't criticize me. Instead, she calmly said, "I'm in my safe period." She even began to be more gentle with me, which took me by surprise. What surprised me even more was that, despite not wanting children, she got pregnant and even expressed her desire to keep the baby. During childbirth, she had complications. I swore to myself that I wouldn't let her suffer through childbirth again and voluntarily underwent a vasectomy. Looking back, I realized how foolish I was. Haley clearly knew whose child this was. She only wanted to have the child of her first love. If I hadn't come home early from my business trip last week and overheard the child's innocent comment about 2 daddies, I might still be in the dark about Haley's deception. My story with Haley is probably like many business marriages among wealthy families. Her family's company hit some difficulties, so they approached my parents for help. The only difference was that I had secretly had a crush on Haley for a long time. I also knew that Haley didn't love me. She had a first love who had been abroad for many years. Marrying me was purely to solve her family's urgent problems. After we married, she remained distant. I thought I could win her love with my genuine feelings. As long as time passed, she would surely feel my love. After Alice was born, we grew even closer. I thought I had touched this high and mighty flower and made her come down from her pedestal, only to have reality slap me hard. 5 years of marriage. Our daughter knows she has another daddy, and Haley watches coldly as I am played for a fool. She must find me very laughable. My phone buzzed. Haley, rarely sending me a message, wrote, "I heard from Jack that you're back from your business trip. Why haven't you come home? Alice has been asking for you these days." I couldn't help but smile bitterly. I had returned home last week to surprise the mother and daughter, only to receive a surprise myself. Facing such a situation, no man can stay calm quickly. I didn't want to argue with Haley in front of Alice, so I quietly left home and moved into a nearby apartment close to the company. It's been a week. Did she only just realize I was back from my trip? But that night, even though I was very angry, I still sent her a message. I told her that I'd be quite busy lately and that staying in an apartment near the company was more convenient. Haley never saw the message, or rather, she might have seen the notification and just swiped it away without reading the content. Thinking of this, I suddenly felt very tired. Was it my mistake to force a relationship in this business marriage? I didn't reply to Haley for the first time. She has never been patient with me. Seeing I didn't respond, she quickly called. When the call connected, she immediately questioned, "Rocky, didn't you see my message?" "Sorry, I'm working late." "Working late? Working late. Do you remember that you have a family? Alice keeps asking for her dad every day. How can you be so indifferent to your daughter?" I remained silent. Actually, I wanted to ask Haley if she remembered she had a family, if she remembered Alice was her and another man's child. But looking at the family photo on my desk, I held back. Alice is sick and wants the tea cakes from He to G. Please buy them and bring them to the hospital. She coldly threw the words before hanging up. Then she sent a location. Thinking of Alice's tender and adorable face calling me daddy, I softened again. After all, she's my my daughter, whom I raised with my own hands. I drove to Hita G, bought Alice's favorite custard buns and Phoenix claws, and rushed to the hospital. Just as I reached the hospital room door, I heard Alice's clear voice. "Tony, Daddy, Alice has been very brave today. She ate her medicine and got her shots like a good girl." I stopped in my tracks and looked inside. A young man in a white coat was gently smiling. Tony, Haley's white moonlight. He affectionately patted Alice's head. "My daughter is so good." Haley stood by, watching Tony and Alice interact with a gentle expression on her face. In the 5 years I've been married to her, I've never seen her look like this. The three of them in the hospital room were so harmonious, as if they were a family of three. In terms of bloodline, they truly are a family, aren't they? My chest felt like it was blocked by a thick layer of cotton. I felt like a complete fool, having rushed to the hospital with Hideji's snacks. I was glowing green with embarrassment. My feet felt glued to the ground. I stood at the door, unsure whether to enter or leave. It was Tony who first noticed me, raising his eyebrows behind his gold-rimmed glasses. "Rocky?" Hearing my name, Haley's previously gentle expression instantly turned cold. She turned to look at me, her gaze indifferent. "Why did you only come now?" When her eyes landed on the Hita G bag I was holding, she pressed her lips together. "Tony has already brought dinner for Alice. So, are the snacks I waited in a long line to buy for Alice no longer needed?" Haley knows well how difficult it is to get takeout from Hita G. Tony smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Alice didn't eat much today. We can keep this for a late-night snack." Alice, hearing Tony mention a late-night snack, immediately clapped her hands. "I want a late-night snack." Haley shook her head disapprovingly. "No, you can't eat anything after brushing your teeth at night. Otherwise, you'll get cavities." But Tony countered, "Children are still growing. If she wants to eat, let her. Alice still seems too thin to me." Haley looked at Tony helplessly. "You spoil her too much." Alice, being clever, picked up on her mother's concession and cheered up. Even though I had already entered the room, I felt like an outsider, unable to interject. Seeing Haley's agreement, Tony smiled and reached out for the snack bag in my hand. "Rocky, give me the snacks." He said it as if he were the head of the household, as if he were Haley's husband. Tony's eyes held a hint of provocation. He knew well that if I had been the one to persuade Haley earlier, she wouldn't have agreed. She never allowed me to contradict her when it came to raising Alice. A surge of uncontrollable anger rose within me. Since I stepped into this room, Haley had been unfriendly and Tony had been deliberately provocative. Alice hadn't even called me daddy of her own accord. I began to reflect on myself. Had I been too much of a doormat in the past, to the point where Haley could treat me this way? Not only did she make me raise her first love's child, but she also did it openly in front of me. Did she really think I was a pushover? I glared at Tony's outstretched, well-defined hand and suddenly sneered. Then I threw the Hita G snacks directly into the trash can. "There's no need. Since you've had dinner, why still think about a late-night snack?" Tony and Haley were both stunned. The first to react was Alice, who, seeing the snacks thrown away, started crying and throwing a tantrum. "I want a late-night snack. Daddy is so mean. I hate Daddy." Haley scolded me sharply. "Rocky, have you lost your mind?" Tony quickly picked up Alice and comforted her. "Alice, it's okay. Tony Daddy will go buy more for you. Don't cry." Alice sniffled in his arms, waving her small hands in the air. "Daddy is bad. I don't want Rocky Daddy. I only want Tony Daddy." Haley said coldly, "Alice is already sick. How can you be so cruel to her? Don't you have any sense of being a father?" I looked at Haley and for the first time found her once cool face utterly repulsive. "I'm not a father here. Isn't there one right here?" She instinctively frowned, intending to be angry with me, but when her eyes met mine, she froze. "You three are really a family. It's fine. Don't put the responsibility of being a father on me." I left that statement and saw Haley's expression change drastically. I turned and left, only for Haley to chase after me. At the elevator, she caught up with me, grabbing my arm and breathing heavily. "Rocky, what did you mean by that? What are you going crazy about?" I stopped, turned to face her, and asked, "And what about you? Are you feeling guilty?" She was momentarily speechless, then coldly sneered. "Guilty? I'm the one asking you what nonsense you were talking about." Even at this point, she still wouldn't admit it. She still wanted to make me the scapegoat. "Let's get a divorce." I suddenly felt completely disheartened. I should have suggested divorce the moment I got the paternity test results, instead of holding on to the hope that Haley might feel some softness for me and showing up here to be humiliated. Haley looked taken aback. "Divorce? Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden?" I said softly. "Haley, you may not realize, but I understand you better than you think. If you hadn't done anything wrong, if you had no regrets, you wouldn't have come running after me." Her face turned pale. I could feel her fingers still gripping my arm, trembling slightly. I shook my head with a smile and pushed her hand away as I entered the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw Haley's lips moving, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. I returned to the downtown penthouse and quickly packed my things. After 5 years of marriage, I had so few belongings that they fit into one suitcase. Dragging the suitcase back to the apartment, I discovered that Haley had called me numerous times. Seeing that I didn't answer, she sent several messages. "Rocky, did someone say something to you? Are you serious about the divorce? Understand this, our marriage represents more than just us. It involves both Haley's and Rocky's families." Reading this, I felt self-deprecating. I thought she chased after me because she might feel a hint of guilt, but it turned out she was worried I might know something that could affect the cooperation between our families. But why should I care? When I married her, I used the power of the Rocky family to save Haley's family from bankruptcy. Because I loved her, I had been giving concessions in our business dealings with her family all these years. What did I get in return? A wife who only showed me a good face when she was happy, and a child who wasn't mine. Was I just a soft target for her to exploit? I didn't respond to Haley's messages, but instead contacted a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. The lawyer worked efficiently and sent the draft the next day. I looked it over, saw no major issues, and sent it to Haley. Her call came through almost immediately. Interestingly, in the past 5 years of marriage, she had reached out to me less frequently than she did in these past few days. "Rocky, are you serious?" I could hear the anger in Haley's voice. Perhaps she didn't expect me to actually take steps toward divorce. As you can see, I'm not joking. Let me tell you, once we're divorced, there's no turning back. She spoke with a tone of finality, as if she was sure I would regret the divorce. Even though I had already decided to part ways with her, her tone still made me feel a bit sad. Her certainty was a reflection of her awareness of my feelings for her. But knowing full well how she had stomped on my feelings, she still chose to act this way. I blinked and said, "Haley, why don't I step aside for Tony? Isn't that fair? You're talking nonsense. It's really annoying." She was furious and hung up the phone. I had expected that Haley would quickly sign the divorce agreement. However, there was no word from her. On the weekend, my parents unexpectedly asked me to come home for dinner. Given that this divorce issue was something I needed to discuss with them, I decided to go back home. To my surprise, as soon as I walked in, I saw Haley's parents chatting amiably with my parents. Haley, unusually, was busy in the kitchen with the housekeeper. Alice, who was playing with her toys, saw me come in, and her face brightened as she called out, "Daddy." I stopped in my tracks. Alice's daddy interrupted the conversation in the room. Both my parents and Haley's parents turned to look at me. The scene made it clear that Haley had probably mentioned the divorce to them and had called them over to mediate. Sure enough, as soon as I changed my shoes and sat down in the living room, my dad had the housekeeper take Alice away. "I hear from Haley that you want a divorce? You're not young anymore and you have a child. Why bring this up now?" My dad started, his tone stern, likely thinking that I was causing trouble outside. Since Haley's parents couldn't bring up the topic directly, given that they've been reliant on the Rocky family for years, Haley's mother joined in. "Rocky, we entrusted Haley to you with peace of mind. We haven't heard of any significant issues between you two. Why suddenly the divorce? Did you meet someone questionable outside? Rocky, as a man, I understand you, but the relationship between you and Haley is not just about love. Marriage involves two families. If there are issues, we can sit down and resolve them. Divorce is a big deal and should not be taken lightly, especially for the sake of the child." Haley's father also chimed in, showing dissatisfaction despite his understanding words. The only one who remained silent was my mother, who looked at me with disapproval. I didn't know what Haley had told them, but it was clear they all believed I was at fault. It seemed that dinner was off the table. Initially, I had hoped to part on good terms with Haley, but at this moment, I didn't feel like sparing her any grace. Just how much confidence had my past behavior given her? "Tell Haley to stop fussing and come out. We need to discuss why I'm insisting on a divorce." Soon, Haley came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands. She was wearing a ginger-colored dress, one I had bought for her when we first married. She hadn't liked the color back then, so she had never worn it. But today, she chose to wear it, attempting to hint at a truce. It was obvious she knew what might please me. Yet, over the past 5 years, she had never made such an effort. Now, when faced with divorce, she hurriedly wore this dress to suggest she was softening. Her pride prevented her from saying the words of apology outright, so she tried to signal me in this superficial way. At this moment, I felt both helpless and a bit irritated. Did she really think so little of my self-respect? I gave a self-deprecating smile and took out the paternity test report, which I had reviewed countless times, placing it on the coffee table. This is the reason for the divorce. No amount of words was as convincing as a paternity test. Haley's face drained of color as she saw the words paternity test on the cover of the document. Her face turned ashen, and she looked up at me in disbelief, her lips trembling. When did you? Both sets of parents' expressions changed drastically. My mother was the first to pick up the paternity test. She flipped to the last page, saw the result, and immediately collapsed onto the sofa, clutching her chest. The impact of the paternity test was like a nuclear bomb. Haley's parents didn't even dare to look at it. So, I don't see any point in discussing this further. After 5 years, I believe I've been more than patient. I spoke softly, looking at Haley, who was pale and barely able to stand. Sign the divorce agreement as soon as possible. For Alice's sake, you should return her to her biological father. Haley was at a loss for words. Her father, enraged, slapped her hard. She instantly had tears in her eyes. Her mother, distressed, grabbed her husband. Can't you speak properly? Why hit her? Haley's father threw her mother aside. It's your indulgence that led to this shameful situation. You still protect her. Do you think you're honoring the in-laws? My mother was about to speak, but was silenced by Haley's father's words. I stood up. The facts are clear. Uncle and Annie, please take Haley and Alice and leave. Any further discussions can be held behind closed doors. My parents need an explanation from me. Rocky. Haley's father's face was filled with embarrassment, but I was firm. If they needed to discipline their daughter, they should do it privately, not make a show of it here. Haley stood there, stunned, seemingly not expecting things to turn out this way. Her father grabbed her. Let's go. What are you standing here for? You're making a fool of yourself. Her mother, unable to calm her angry husband, could only hug Alice, her eyes red, and followed them out. Dinner was ultimately not served. After calming my parents down, I returned to the apartment. There, I found Haley, disheveled, squatting outside my door. Since I decided to divorce, I had changed the password to the apartment so she couldn't get in and was waiting for me outside. Hearing my footsteps, she looked up at me. Rocky, are you satisfied? My father has never hit me since I was a child, but because of you, he did it for the first time. Haley slowly stood up. The ginger dress made her face look extremely pale. In the corridor light, I could clearly see the marks on her face from the slap. It looked quite harsh. Did she really think showing me the marks would make me feel guilty? It was rather ironic. I don't understand. How can you still have the face to come to me? It was the first time in 5 years of marriage that I spoke to her so harshly. Clearly, Haley couldn't handle it, and her eyes reddened. I opened the door to go inside. Haley tried to follow, but I blocked her at the door. Sorry, I've already proposed divorce. This place isn't suitable for you anymore. She bit her lip. Do you have to be so ruthless? I looked at her seriously. You had a child with another man, told the child she has a biological father, and you and your daughter kept me in the dark, playing me for a fool. Who's really being ruthless here? Haley was speechless. I know you didn't marry me out of love, but why couldn't you even manage basic fidelity? I don't understand why you're here now. Tony has returned, and Alice knows he's her biological father. If I divorce you and give Tony a chance, wouldn't that be a happy ending for everyone? No, it's not like that, Rocky. You need to hear me out. There's nothing to explain. Just answer one question. Is Alice Tony's child? She was mortified but nodded slightly. So, sign the divorce agreement quickly or I'll file a lawsuit. Don't say I'm not giving the Haley family any face. I said coldly, then closed the door, leaving Haley outside. I won't leave unless you're willing to hear my explanation. Haley sent me this message and sat down in front of my door again. I was feeling irritated. What is she trying to do? Win me back? How ridiculous. They say that late affection is worth less than grass. Why didn't she do anything earlier? I didn't want to deal with her and went to the study to handle my own affairs. As night fell, the doorbell rang. Haley was outside crying. Rocky, I know I was wrong. Open the door, please. I will explain everything. I pretended not to hear. Rocky, can you really just walk away from the feelings we shared over the years? I don't believe it. Can't you give me another chance? I never thought that Haley, who had always been as cold and distant as a snow-capped mountain in front of me, would be reduced to such a state of emotional breakdown outside my door. There were complaints in the neighborhood group. I thought for a moment and called Tony directly. Come and take Haley away. Tony arrived quickly and, half coaxing and half carrying, took the sobbing Haley away. The next day, Tony asked to meet with me. He was here to mediate for Haley. Sitting in a cafe, I fiddled with the spoon in my cup and scoffed lightly. I thought that after I left, you two would reconcile. Tony gave a wry smile. At least before you came to the hospital, I thought so too. He began to recount the past between him and Haley. One was a small-town student who worked tirelessly to earn a chance to study abroad. The other was a wealthy woman who had everything handed to her effortlessly. She didn't understand his anxieties about an uncertain future, but but didn't want to hinder his pursuit of a better future. So they agreed on a 5-year term, promising he would return after 5 years. But during the 4th year, Haley's family had problems. Haley had no choice but to marry you. She is a girl who idealizes love, feeling that she betrayed the relationship first and has been blaming herself, so she feels guilty towards me. I smiled faintly. So this is why you and she had a fleeting romance and now want to cling to me? Tony's expression changed. No matter how gloriously he described their relationship, the underlying filth couldn't be covered up by those words. When I heard Haley tell Alice that Tony was her biological father, I carefully traced the timeline. Alice was a little over 4 years old, meaning she was conceived around the time of our wedding. The night before the wedding, Haley had gone to a bachelorette party with her friends. She had sent me a short video to reassure me. Tony was in that video. Tony and I first met at the wedding. Haley openly introduced him as her first love and even had us add each other on Facebook. After attending our wedding, Tony flew back to the US immediately. Other than congratulating me and sending a red envelope on Facebook after Alice was born, Tony and I had almost no communication. It was precisely because of Haley's open attitude that I didn't suspect anything at the time. Perhaps I hit a nerve. Tony took a sip of his coffee to cover his discomfort. I suddenly asked him, "Why did you come here pretending to mediate if you clearly didn't want to?" He showed a hint of embarrassment. "Because Haley told me last night that she realized she loves you." I was taken aback. "She only realized she loved me after proposing a divorce? Don't you believe it?" Tony said indignantly. "Do you think I'm provoking you for no reason? I've noticed she's been bringing up your name more and more recently." Oh. So her love is characterized by being cold as ice to me on a daily basis, cheating behind my back, and expecting me to raise your child. I found it amusing. Haley has a strong sense of pride. Perhaps she can't accept that she betrayed her first love and fell for you. So she tries to hide her feelings with coldness when she's around you. I glanced at my watch and suddenly realized I was still too idle. I shouldn't be wasting time here listening to Tony defend Haley. Forget it. Tell Haley I have no reason to pick up this worn-out shoe. She doesn't deserve it. Tony jumped up. "Rocky, you're being unreasonable." At that moment, a woman at the table behind Tony, wearing a mask, stood up. It was Haley. Her face was pale, tears in her eyes. "Rocky, you called me a worn-out shoe. Do you truly despise me that much? I know I made a mistake when I was unclear-headed back then, but we've been through so much over the years. Can't you, for the sake of our past, forgive me this once?" "Haley, look at me. Why are you still begging him when Rocky is degrading you like this?" I nodded. "Yes, you finally got back together with your first love, and Alice can reunite with her biological father. Why do you have to break them apart?" Haley's tears fell as she choked up. "In the end, it's all my fault. Alice, if you can't accept her, I will make it up to you. We can have other children, and I will give you another one." "Haley," Tony looked at her in disbelief. "How can you say that? Alice will be heartbroken hearing this." I felt disgusted. "After I found out you had me raising another man's daughter for 4 years, your idea of compensation is to give me another child?" Haha. I was truly at a loss whether to laugh or cry. "Haley, please face reality. I'm not someone you can't do without." Her face finally showed a pained expression. I turned and walked away. Rocky, Haley called after me as Tony pulled her back. "Haley, give up. You can see that the only one truly devoted to loving you is me." Tony's involvement led me to completely lose hope of reaching a divorce agreement with Haley. I decided to directly entrust a lawyer to file for divorce. The matter stirred quite a commotion. Haley's parents, unable to bear the shame, forced her to sign the divorce agreement. A month later, I finally received the divorce certificate. Haley came too. She had lost a lot of weight and no longer had the same proud, spirited demeanor she once had. As we walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, she hesitantly asked me, "Rocky, can we have a meal together?" I shook my head. "Forget it. Let's just act like we don't know each other from now on." She bit her lip and couldn't hold back her tears any longer. I walked past her and directly got into my car, catching a glimpse of Tony walking past with Alice in his arms. What is Haley regretting now? When I was fully devoted to her, she was preoccupied with Tony, believing that our marriage betrayed her pure love. Now that I've severed my feelings for her and am divorcing her, she's clinging to me and ignoring Tony, who has always been by her side. Does Haley really understand love? She loves nothing more than the illusion she has of herself. Once it was Tony, now it's me. She'll never learn to cherish the person in front of her. After the divorce, my mother started arranging blind dates for me again. I wasn't opposed to it, but finding a suitable marriage partner wasn't that easy. When Haley learned that I had started dating again, she called me late at night. When I answered, she just cried without saying a word. After a couple of times, I blocked her. 6 months later, I started dating Serena, the vice president of Julie Group, a business partner of mine. After a few months of dating, we decided to get married. However, Haley somehow found out about my wedding with Serena. She went wild. She showed up drunk outside our new apartment in the middle of the night, causing a scene. I was fed up and called Tony to take her away. Fortunately, Serena was very understanding. She knew about the troubles in my marriage with Haley and didn't make a fuss. After the wedding, I took a special vacation and went abroad with Serena for our honeymoon. When we returned, Tony came to see me with a bleak expression. He said, "Haley has decided to marry me." I nodded. "Congratulations, it's good to see things finally work out." He smiled bitterly. "She only agreed to my proposal out of spite after hearing that you and your new wife went on a honeymoon." I sighed. There was no need for this. I had moved on from being cheated on, so why was Haley still holding on? I patted Tony on the shoulder. His face was full of uncertainty about the future. All I could do was wish him good luck. I saw Haley again at the obstetrics and gynecology department of the city hospital. Serena, my wife, was pregnant and we were there for a checkup. We ran into Tony and Haley. Haley had arrived earlier than us. Serena was only 3 months along, but Haley's pregnancy was already noticeable. Tony was carefully supporting her, but Haley no longer looked at Tony with the tender expression she used to. "If you think you're too busy, just go on and be busy. Don't act like you're too good to accompany me for a checkup. Wasn't it your child?" When I was pregnant with Alice, Rocky, hearing my name brought up at such a moment was just too uncomfortable, so I quickly pulled my wife in the other direction. During the new year, my mother mentioned that Haley, she's with her first love now, but life isn't going well. Last time I saw her shopping with Alice, she was so overwhelmed she started hitting the child in front of everyone. Alice was crying so hard, it made me feel sorry. Despite her past being addressed as grandma by my mother, she almost went over to help. "Don't be foolish. Your real daughter-in-law's baby is your true granddaughter." My mother gave me a reproachful look. "Do you think I'm that clueless?" Coincidentally, that night, Tony invited me for a drink. I pretended not to see the message. While keeping vigil with my wife, my phone kept vibrating. I picked it up to find Tony, drunk, had sent me several voice messages. "Is it really that easy to fall in love but hard to stay together? I thought that by getting Alice back and marrying Haley, we could start fresh, but why does it end up like this? Haley doesn't understand my job at all. I'm a pediatrician and I'm very busy. She keeps comparing me to you, saying you were also busy, but always managed to be there for her when she needed you." He even cried in the messages. Serena, hearing Tony's messages, was surprised. "You're still in touch with him? Tony is a male mistress. How can you still be friends with him? Aren't you too open-minded?" I calmly put my phone away and held her close. She suddenly realized, "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" I smiled. How could it not be intentional? I deliberately didn't delete Tony's contact and occasionally chatted with him, showing off my relationship with Serena in front of him. In comparison, his marriage with Haley wasn't as happy as he imagined. After all, Tony didn't have the financial backing I had. To support Haley, he had to rely on his own efforts. Originally, Tony was a promising talent at the hospital when he returned from studying in the US. But to take care of Haley, he compromised many times and gave up many opportunities, leading the hospital to lose interest in him. He ended up as just a department head with no significant promotion. He often vented his frustrations to me, showing signs of treating me as a close friend. Sometimes I found it quite amusing. Tony said that after Haley became pregnant, he couldn't manage alone and brought his parents to help with Alice and the pregnant Haley. With the in-laws living so close, there were naturally many frictions. When Haley was still my wife, although my mother was unhappy with her cold attitude, she never complained. Now, dealing with everyday trivialities, it was clear she couldn't be at ease. Seeing Haley's current situation made me feel quite pleased. Don't say I'm petty. Haley, who always wanted more, should have known from the moment she chose to pin Alice on me that she would face such consequences. As for Tony, he's not innocent either. Who would be so shameless as to have an affair with an ex-girlfriend the night before her wedding? He clearly knew Alice was his child all along. He had laughed at me with Haley before, so why shouldn't I enjoy seeing him and Haley's misfortunes? Serena laughed at me. "You're really something, pretending to be magnanimous on the surface, fooling everyone. Even Mom said you're a fool. I see. You're full of scheming." After the new year, Serena gave birth to a pair of twins. At the same time, I learned from Tony that Haley had not kept the baby. On New Year's Eve, she had a huge fight with Tony's mother, then went back to her parents' house. She went to a private hospital and had the baby, almost 7 months along, aborted. She even sent the baby's body to Tony's parents. Tony's mother reportedly fainted on the spot and upon waking, forced Tony to to divorce Haley. Now they are tangled up in a divorce battle. Haley's family isn't easy to deal with either, immediately hiring people to cause trouble at the hospital where Tony works. As a result, Tony had to take a leave of absence. Their lives were shattered. After sending him a newly taken family photo, I deleted Tony's contact. Seeing them suffer so badly, I finally felt that my own grievances had been relieved. The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.